Ahoy again, it's me, Ron Gabaldon, coming to you from a closet with my wonderful, wonderful cat, Meowmar Podolphy. He's a really great guy. And he's got kidney disease, and we're treating him for that. It's just very expensive. So we've set up the GoFundMe, and any amount that you can give, because I really love him and I'd like to keep him around. That link is down below in the description. And again, thank you for sticking around for all of this Deadeye Dick, Kurt Vonnegut book. I'm sure Meowmar appreciates it. Okay, he wants down, so let's just go ahead and put him down. There you go. All right. Go hang out. Otherwise, though, I've got books available on Audible still. I've got Nobody's Billboard t-shirts for sale on a Redbubble webpage. So any number of ways you can find me on Audible, mostly by looking for Ron Gabaldon, an audiobook narrator of sorts. I appreciate you guys sticking around and helping out however you can. I hope you guys really enjoy these Kurt Vonnegut books. They're a lot of work to put together. It takes about 6 hours of hardcore recording and editing to put together 1 hour of audio. So they're very intensive. It's very time-intensive work. It takes a lot to put together. I don't just read it all the way through. There's a technique to it. Maybe at some point I'll set up a different channel just to kind of talk you through my journey of audiobook narration if anyone's interested, because I know a lot of people are interested in getting involved in this kind of work. Otherwise, though, thank you all for joining me. And here is part 5 of Deadeye Dick by Kurt Vonnegut. Deadeye Dick by Kurt Vonnegut. Part 5. Finale. Chapters 25 through Epilogue. Read by Ron Gabaldon and a cat named Meowmar. 25. There was just a prayer and some music after that, thank God, and then the recessional, with the pallbearers wheeling the casket out to the hearse. Otherwise, Felix's sobbing could have wrecked the funeral. Mother and I gave up on going to the burial. We had no thought but to get Felix out of the church and into the county hospital. It was all we could do to not get out ahead of the casket. We had come late, so we were parked fairly far out on the parking lot, and there were a number of neighborhood children paying their respects to the Rolls-Royce. They had never seen one before, I'm sure, but they knew what it was. They were so reverent that they might have been attending an open casket funeral right there in the parking lot. Celia Hoover's casket, by the way, was closed. That must have been because of the Drano. We got Felix into the back seat without any trouble. He sat there with the top down, sobbing away. I think we could have sent him up a tree, and he would have been up among the branches and birds' nests, sobbing away. But he wouldn't give us the keys. The keys were too materialistic a concern for him to consider at such a time. So I had to go through his pockets while Mother told me to hurry up, hurry up. I happened to glance in the direction of the church, and I saw that Dwayne Hoover, maybe having told everybody to stay behind, that he had some private business with Felix to conduct, was coming in our direction. He might have been expected to remain close to the hearse and to duck curious and possibly accusing eyes by getting into the undertaker's Cadillac limousine behind it. But no, he was going to trudge 50 yards out into the parking lot instead, and we were the only people out there since we had fled the church so quickly. So it was like a scene in a cowboy movie, with the townspeople all huddled together and with a half-broken, tragic, great big man going to meet destiny all alone. The hearse could wait. He had business to settle first. If this confrontation scene were done as a playlet, the set could be very simple. A curb along the back of the stage might indicate the edge of the parking lot. A Rolls-Royce with its top down, which is the expensive part, could be parked next to that, aimed left. Flats behind the curb could be painted with trees and shrubbery. A tasteful wooden sign might make the location more specific, saying, First Methodist Church, visitors parking, all persons welcome. Felix would be sobbing in the back seat of the Rolls-Royce. Mother, whose name was Emma, and I, whose name is Rudy, would be between the convertible and the audience. Emma would have the heebie-jeebies wanting to get out of there, and Rudy would be frisking Felix for the keys. Felix.
Who cares about the keys?
Emma.
Hurry up. Oh, please hurry up.
Rudy. How many pockets can they put in a London suit? God damn it, Felix. Felix.
You're making me sorry I came home.
Emma.
I could die.
Felix.
I loved her so much.
Rudy. Did you ever? Rudy happens to look in the direction of the church, off right, and is appalled to see Dwayne approaching. Rudy. Oh my God. Felix.
Pray for her. That's what I'm going to do.
Rudy. Felix, get out of the car. Emma.
Let him stay there. Get him to hunker down.
Rudy. Mother, look behind you. Here comes Dwayne. Emma looks, hates what she sees. Emma.
Oh, you'd think he'd stay with the body.
Rudy. Felix, get out of the car, because I think somebody just might want to beat the shit out of you. Felix.
I just got home.
Rudy. I'm not kidding. Here comes Dwayne. He beat the shit out of Dr. Mitchell a week ago. This could be your turn. Felix.
I've got to fight him?
Rudy. Get out of the car and run! Felix gets out of the car, muttering and complaining. His tears have abated some. The danger is so unreal to him that he doesn't even look to see where the danger may be coming from. He is distracted by the dent and scratch on the side of the car as Dwayne enters right and stops. Felix.
Oh, look at that. What a shame.
Dwayne. It really is. A beautiful machine like that. Felix straightens up and turns to look at him. Felix.
Hello. You're the husband.
Dwayne. Where do you fit in?
Felix. What?
Dwayne. I'm the husband, and I never felt worse in my life. But I couldn't cry the way you cried. I never heard anybody cry like you did, male or female. Where do you fit in? Felix.
We were sweethearts in high school.
As Dwayne thinks this over, Felix takes a bottle of pills from a pocket and starts to open it. Emma.
No more pills.
Rudy. My brother isn't well.
Emma.
He's insane, and I used to be so proud of him.
Dwayne. I'd be sorry to believe he was crazy. I'm hoping he was crying because he was sane. Emma.
He can't fight. He never could.
Rudy. We're on our way to the hospital. Felix.
Just a damn minute here. I was crying because I'm sane. I'm the sanest person in this whole shitstorm. What the hell's going on?
Emma.
Go ahead and get your brains beaten out.
Felix.
You must be the worst mother a person ever had.
Emma.
I never disgraced myself and my family in public, I'll tell you that.
Felix.
You never sewed on a button either. You never hugged or kissed me.
Emma.
Who could blame me?
Felix.
You never did anything a mother's supposed to do.
Dwayne. Just tell me more about why you cried. Felix.
We were raised by servants. Did you know that? This lady here ought to get switches and coal every Mother's Day. My brother and I know so much about black people and so little about white people that we should be in a minstrel show.
Dwayne. He really is crazy, isn't he? Felix.
Amos and Andy.
Emma.
I have never been so humiliated in my life, and as a younger woman I have traveled all over this world.
Dwayne. At least you've never had a wife commit suicide, or a husband. Emma.
I know, you've been through so much, and then all this on top of it.
Dwayne. I don't know what part of the world you could have visited, where having the person you were married to commit suicide wasn't the most humiliating thing that could happen. Emma.
You go back to your friends, and again, I'm so ashamed of my son. I wish he were dead. Go back to your friends.
Dwayne. Those people back there? You know something? I think maybe I would have come walking out here alone, even if you hadn't been out here. If you hadn't given me a logical place to stop, I might have kept walking until I was in Kathmandu. I'm the only person in town who hasn't been to Kathmandu. My dentist's been to Kathmandu. Emma.
You go to Herb Stacks too?
Dwayne. Sure. Celia too. Or used to. Emma.
I wonder why we never met there.
Felix.
Because he uses Gleam toothpaste with Floristan.
Emma.
I can't be responsible for what he says. I can't imagine how he got control of an entire major television network.
Dwayne. Celia never told me that you and she were sweethearts. That was her big complaint right up to the end, you know. That nobody had ever loved her, so why should she even go to the dentist anymore? Emma.
Radio, too. He was also in charge of radio.
Felix.
You're interrupting an important conversation, as usual. Mr. Hoover. Yes, Celia and I were not only sweethearts in high school, but I realized there in the church that she was the only woman I had ever loved, and maybe the only woman I will ever love. I hope I have not offended you.
Dwayne. I'm glad. I may not look glad, but I am glad. They're going to honk the horn of the hearse any minute to tell me to hurry up, that the cemetery's about to close. She was like this Rolls-Royce here, you know? Felix.
The most beautiful woman I ever knew. No offense. No offense.
Dwayne. No offense. Anybody who wants to can say she was the most beautiful woman he ever saw. You should have married her, not me. Felix.
I wasn't worthy of her. Look at the dent I put in the Rolls-Royce.
Dwayne. You scraped up against something blue. Felix.
Listen, she lasted a lot longer with you than she would have lasted with me. I'm one of the worst husbands there ever was.
Dwayne. Not as bad as me. I just ran away from her. She was so unhappy, and I didn't know what to do about it. And there wasn't anybody else to take her off my hands. I'm good at selling cars. I can really sell cars. I can fix cars. I can really fix cars. But I sure couldn't fix that woman. Never even knew where to get the tools. I put her up on blocks and forgot her. I only wish you'd come along in time to rescue the both of us. But you did me a big favor today. At least I don't have to think my poor wife went all the way through life without finding out what love was. Felix.
Where am I? What have I said? What have I done?
Dwayne. You come on along to the cemetery. I don't care if you're crazy or not. You'll make this automobile dealer feel a little bit better if you'll just cry some more while we put my poor wife in the ground. Curtain. 26. We all see our lives as stories, it seems to me, and I am convinced that psychologists and sociologists and historians and so on would find it useful to acknowledge that. If a person survives an ordinary span of 60 years or more, there is every chance that his or her life as a shapely story has ended. and all that remains to be experienced is epilogue. Life is not over, but the story is. Some people, of course, find inhabiting an epilogue so uncongenial that they commit suicide. Ernest Hemingway comes to mind. Celia Hoover, née Hildreth, comes to mind. My own father's story ended, it seems to me, and it must have seemed to him, when he took all the blame for my having shot Eloise Metzger. And then the police threw him down the iron staircase. He could not be an artist, and he could not be a soldier, but he could at least be heroically honorable and truthful, should an opportunity to be so present itself. That was the story of his life which he carried in his head. The opportunity presented itself. He was heroically honorable and truthful. He was thrown down the staircase, like so much garbage. It was then that these words should have appeared somewhere. The end. But they didn't. But his life as a story was over anyway. The remaining years were epilogue, a sort of junk shop of events which were nothing more than random curiosities, boxes and bins of whatchamacallits. This could be true of nations, too. Nations might think of themselves as stories, and the stories end, but life goes on. Maybe my own country's life as a story ended after the Second World War, when it was the richest and most powerful nation on earth, when it was going to ensure peace and justice everywhere, since it alone had the atom bomb. The end. Felix likes this theory a lot. He says that his own life as a story ended when he was made president of the National Broadcasting Company and was celebrated as one of the 10 best-dressed men in the country. The end. He says, though, that his epilogue rather than his story has been the best part of his life. This must often be the case. Bernard Ketchum told us about one of Plato's dialogues, in which an old man is asked how it felt not to be excited by sex anymore. The old man replies that it was like being allowed to dismount from a wild horse. Felix says that that was certainly how he felt when he was canned by NBC. It may be a bad thing that so many people try to make good stories out of their lives. A story, after all, is as artificial as a mechanical bucking bronco in a drinking establishment. And it may be even worse for nations to try to be characters in stories. Perhaps these words should be carved over doorways of the United Nations and all sorts of parliaments, big and small. Leave your story outside. I got off the wild horse of my own story at Celia Hoover's funeral, I think, when Reverend Harrell forgave me in public for having shot Eloise Metzger so long ago. If it wasn't then, it was only a couple of years after that, when Mother was finally killed by the radioactive mantelpiece. I had paid her back as best I could for ruining her life and Father's. She was no longer in need of personal services. The case was closed. We probably never would have found out that it was the mantelpiece that killed her if it weren't for an art historian from Ohio University over at Athens. His name was Cliff McCarthy. He was a painter, too, and Cliff McCarthy never would have got involved in our lives if it hadn't been for all the publicity Mother received for objecting to the kind of art Fred T. Barry was buying for the Arts Center. He read about her in People magazine. Then again, Mother almost certainly wouldn't have become so passionate about taking Fred T. Barry on in the first place if it hadn't been for the little tumors in her brain, which had been caused by the radioactive mantelpiece. Wheels within wheels! People magazine described Mother as the widow of an Ohio painter. Cliff McCarthy had been working for years, financed by a Cleveland philanthropist, on a book which was to include every serious Ohio painter. But he had never heard of Father. So he visited our little shitbox, and he photographed Father's unfinished painting over the fireplace. That was all there was to photograph, so he took several exposures of that with a big camera on a tripod. He was being polite, I guess. But the camera used flat packs of 4x5 film, and he had exposed some of it elsewhere, so he got several packs out of his camera bag. He accidentally left one behind, on the mantelpiece. 1 week later, he swung off the interstate on his way to someplace else, and he picked up the pack. 3 days after that, he called me on the telephone to say that the film in the pack had all turned black, and that a friend of his who taught physics had offered the opinion that the film had been close to something which was highly radioactive. He gave me another piece of news on the telephone, too. He had been looking at a diary kept by the great Ohio painter Frank Duveneck at the end of his life. He died in 1919 at the age of 71. Duveneck spent his most productive years in Europe, but he returned to his native Cincinnati after his wife died in Florence, Italy.
"Your father is in the diary," said McCarthy. "Duveneck heard about this wonderful studio a young painter was building in Midland City, and on March 16, 1915, he went and had a look at it."
"What did he say?" I asked.
"He said it was certainly a beautiful studio, such as any artist in the world would have given his eye teeth to have."
"I mean, what did he say about Father?" I said.
"He liked him, I think," said McCarthy.
"Look," I said, "I'm aware that my father was a fraud, and Father knew it too. Duveneck was probably the only really important painter who ever saw Father's masquerade. No matter how cutting it is, please tell me what Duveneck said."
"Well, I'll read it to you,"
said McCarthy, and he did.
"Otto Waltz should be shot. He should be shot for seeming to prove the last thing that needs to be proved in this part of the world: that an artist is a person of no consequence."
I asked around about who was in charge of civil defense. I hoped that whoever it was would have a Geiger counter or some other method of measuring radioactivity. It turned out that the director of civil defense for the county was Lowell Ulm, who owned a car wash on the Shepherdstown Turnpike by the airport. He was who you were supposed to call in case of World War III. He did have a Geiger counter. So he came over after work. He had to go home for the Geiger counter first. That innocent-looking mantelpiece, before which Mother had spent so many hours, either gazing into the names or up at Father's unfinished painting, was a killer. Lowell Ulm said this: "Jesus Christ, this thing is hotter than a Hiroshima baby carriage." Mother and I were moved into the new Holiday Inn, while workmen dressed like astronauts on the moon performed radical surgery on our little Avondale shitbox. The irony was, of course, that if Mother had been a typical mother, out in the kitchen or down in the basement or out shopping most of the time, and if I had been a typical son, waiting to be fed and lounging around the living room, I would have been the one to get the fatal dose of radiation. At least Gino and Marco Maritimo were both dead by then, presumably feeling nothing. They would have been heartsick to learn that the house which they had practically given to us was so dangerous. Marco had his peephole closed by natural causes about a month after Celia Hoover's funeral. And then Gino was killed in a freak accident at the Art Center a few months after that. He was trying to get the center's drawbridge to work right, with the dedication ceremonies only a week away, and he was electrocuted. 2 people died during the construction of the Mildred Berry Memorial Center for the Arts. I have no idea how many people were killed during the construction of the Taj Mahal. Hundreds upon hundreds, probably. Beauty seldom comes cheap. But Gino and Marco's sons certainly took the mantelpiece seriously. They were as embarrassed as their fathers would have been, and they told us a lot more than they should have, since Felix and I would eventually decide to sue their corporation and a lot of other people by and by. The mantelpiece, they told us, came from a scrap heap in weeds in the back of an ornamental concrete company outside of Cincinnati. Old Gino had found it there and couldn't see anything wrong with it, and had bought it cheap for the model house, which became our house at Avondale. With a lot of luck and the help of a few honest people, we were able to trace the cement that went into the mantelpiece all the way back to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where pure uranium-235 was produced for the bomb they dropped on Hiroshima in 1945. The government somehow allowed that cement to be sold off as war surplus, even though many people had known how hot it was. In this case, the government was about as careless as a half-wit boy up in a cupola with a loaded Springfield rifle on Mother's Day. When Mother and I moved back into our little shitbox, we didn't have a fireplace anymore. We had been away for only 24 hours, but a sheetrock wall had replaced the fireplace, and the whole living room had been repainted. The Maritimo Brothers Construction Company had done all that at their own expense. It wasn't even possible to tell that we had once had a fireplace. Felix wasn't around to see the transformation. He had taken a job under an assumed name, although his employers knew who he really was, or who he really had been, as an announcer on a radio station in South Bend, Indiana. This wasn't a humiliation. It was what he wanted to do, what he said he had been born to do. He was drug-free. We were so proud of him. Mother said a significant thing when she saw we didn't have a fireplace anymore.
"Oh dear, I don't know if I want to go on living without a fireplace."
What part of her life, you might ask, was story and what part was epilogue? I think her case was similar to Father's in that by the time my brother and I came along, there was nothing left but epilogue. The circumstances of her early life virtually decreed that she live only a pipsqueak story, which was only over a few moments after it had begun. She had nothing to atone for example, since she was never tempted to do anything bad in the first place. And she wasn't going to go seeking any kind of holy grail, since that was clearly a man's job, and she already had a cup that overflowed and overflowed with good things to eat and drink anyway. I suppose that's really what so many American women are complaining about these days. They find their lives short on story and overburdened with epilogue. Mother's story ended when she married the handsomest rich man in town. 27. Mother said that thing about not knowing if she wanted to go on living if she couldn't have a fireplace, and then the telephone rang. Mother answered. I used to be the one to answer the telephone, but now she always beat me to it. Almost every call was thrilling for her, since she had become the local St. Joan of Arc in a holy war against non-representational art. A year had passed since the dedication of the Mildred Berry Memorial Center for the Arts, with speeches and performances by noted creative persons from all over the country. Now it was virtually as empty and unvisited as the old Sears Roebuck downtown, or the railroad station where the Monon and New York Central railroads used to intersect, but which didn't even have tracks anymore. Mother had been bounced off the board of directors of the center for her disruptive behavior at meetings and for her unfriendly comments on the center in the press and before church groups and garden clubs and so on. She was much in demand as a sparkling, prickly public speaker. Fred T. Barry, for his part, had become as silent as the center itself. I saw his Lincoln limousine a couple of times, but the back windows were opaque, so I have no idea whether he was in there or not. I would see his company jet parked out at the airport sometimes, but never him. I expected to hear news of Mr. Barry from time to time, as in the past, from employees of his who happened into the drugstore. But then it became evident that Mr. Barry's employees were boycotting Schramm's drugstore, both night and day, because my mother's younger son was an employee there. So it was a surprise that Mother now found herself talking on the telephone to none other than Fred T. Barry. He hoped, with all possible courtliness, that Mother would be home during the next hour and willing to receive him. He had never been in our little shitbox before. I doubt, in fact, that he had ever before been in Avondale. Mother told him to come ahead. Those were her exact words, delivered in the flat tones of someone who had never lost a fight.
"Come ahead if you want to."
Mother and I had not yet begun to speculate seriously about what the radioactive mantelpiece might have done to our health, nor had we been encouraged to do so. Nor would we ever be encouraged to do so. Ulm, the director of civil defense and car wash tycoon, had been getting advice on our case over the telephone from somebody at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in Washington, D.C., to the effect that the most important thing was that nobody panic. In order to prevent panic, the workmen who had torn out our fireplace, wearing protective clothing provided by Ulm, had been sworn to secrecy in the name of patriotism, of national security. The cover story, provided by Washington, D.C., and spread throughout Avondale while Mother and I were staying at the new Holiday Inn, was that our house had been riddled by termites, and that the protective clothing was necessary, since the workmen had killed the insects with cyanide. Insects. So we did not panic. Good citizens don't. We waited calmly for Fred T. Barry. I was at the picture window peering out at the street between slats of the Venetian blinds. Mother was reclining in the Barcalounger my brother Felix had given her 3 Christmases ago. She was vibrating almost imperceptibly, and the reassuring drone came from underneath her. She had the massage motor turned on low. Mother said that she didn't feel any different now that she knew she had been exposed to radioactivity.
"Do you feel any different?"
she asked. "No," I said. This sort of conversation is going to become increasingly common, I think, as radioactive materials get spread around the world.
"If we were in such great danger," she said, "you'd think we would have noticed something. There would have been dead bugs on the mantelpiece, don't you think? Or the plants would have gotten funny spots or something."
Meanwhile, little tumors were blooming in her head.
"I'm so sorry they told the neighbors we had termites," she said. "I wish they could have thought of something else. It's like telling everybody we had leprosy."
It turned out that she had had traumatic experiences with termites in childhood, which she had never mentioned to me. She had suppressed the memory all those years, but now she told me, full of horror, of walking into the music room of her father's mansion, which she had believed to be so indestructible when she was a little girl, and seeing what looked like foam boiling out the floor and a baseboard near the grand piano, and out of the legs and the keyboard of the piano itself.
"There were billions and billions of bugs with shiny wings, acting for all the world like a liquid," she said. "I ran and got Father. He couldn't believe his eyes either. Nobody had played the piano for years. If somebody had played it, maybe it would have driven the bugs out of there. Father gave a piano leg a little kick, and it crumpled like it was made out of cardboard. The piano fell down."
This was clearly one of the most memorable events of her whole life, and I had never heard it before. If she had died in childhood, she would have remembered life as the place you went in case you wanted to see bugs eat a grand piano. So Fred T. Barry arrived in his limousine. He was so old now, and Mother was so old now, and they had had this long fight about whether modern art was any good or not. I let him in, and Mother received him while lying on the Barcalounger. "I have come to surrender, Mrs. Waltz," he said. "You should be very proud of yourself. I have lost all interest in the Arts Center, It can be turned into a chicken coop for all I care. I am leaving Midland City forever."
"I am sure you had the best intentions, Mr. Barry," she said. "I never doubted that. But the next time you try to give somebody a wonderful present, make sure they want it first. Don't try to stuff it down their throats."
He sold his company to the Ramjack Corporation for a gazillion bucks. A firm that acquires American farmland for Arabs bought his farm. As far as I know, no Arab has ever come to take a look at it. He himself moved to Hilton Head, South Carolina, and I have heard nothing about him since. He was so bitter that he left no endowment behind to maintain the art center, and the city was so broke that it could only let the place go to rack and ruin. And then, one day, there was this flash. Mother died a year after Fred T. Barry surrendered to her. When she was in the hospital for the last time, she thought she was in a spaceship. She thought I was Father, and that we were headed for Mars, where we were going to have a second honeymoon. She was as alive as anybody and utterly mistaken about everything. She wouldn't let go of my hand.
"That picture,"
she said, and she would smile and give my hand a squeeze. I was supposed to know which of all the pictures in the world she meant. I thought for a while that it was Father's unfinished masterpiece from his misspent youth in Vienna. But in a moment of clarity, she made it clear that it was a scrapbook photograph of her in a rowboat on a small river somewhere, maybe in Europe. Then again, it could have been Sugar Creek. The boat is tied to shore. There aren't any oars in place. She isn't going anywhere. She wears a summer dress and a garden hat. Somebody has persuaded her to pose in the boat, with water around her and dappled with shade. She is laughing. She has just been married, or is about to be married. She will never be happier. She will never be more beautiful. Who could have guessed that that young woman would take a rocket ship to Mars someday? She was 77 when she died, so that all sorts of things, including plain old life, could have closed her peephole. But the autopsy revealed that she had been healthy as a young horse, except for tumors in her head. Tumors of that sort, moreover, could only have been caused by radiation. So Felix and I hired Bernard Ketchum to sue everybody who had bought or sold in any form the radioactive cement from Oak Ridge. It took a while to win, and I meanwhile kept going to work 6 nights a week at Schramm's drugstore and keeping house in the little shitbox out in Avondale. There isn't all that much difference between keeping house for 2 and keeping house for 1. My Mercedes continued to give me an indecent amount of pleasure. At one point there, through a misunderstanding, I was suspected of abducting and murdering a little girl. So the state police scientists impounded the Mercedes, and they went over it inch by inch with fingerprint powder and a vacuum cleaner and so on. When they gave it back to me, along with a clean bill of health, they said they had never seen anything like it. The car was 7 years old then, and had over 100,000 miles on it, but every hair in it and every fingerprint on it belonged to just one person, the owner. "You aren't what we would call real sociable," one trooper said. "How come you got a car with 4 doors?" Polka dot brownies. Melt half a cup of butter and a pound of light brown sugar in a 2-quart saucepan. Stir over a low fire until just bubbly. Cool to room temperature. Beat in 2 eggs and a teaspoon of vanilla. Stir in a cup of sifted flour, a half teaspoon of salt, a cup of chopped filberts, and a cup of semi-sweet chocolate in small chunks. Spread into a well-greased 9x11 baking pan. Bake at 235 degrees for about 35 minutes. Cool to room temperature and cut into squares with a well-greased knife. I think I was about as happy as anybody else in Midland City, and maybe in the country, as I waited for all the lawsuits to come to a head. But there you have a problem in relativity again. I continued to be comforted by music of my own making, the scat singing, the brainless inward fusillades of Skeety Wahs and Bodie Does, and so on. I had a Blaupunkt AM/FM stereophonic radio in my Mercedes, but I hardly ever turned it on. As for scat singing, I came across what I consider a most amusing graffito, written in ballpoint pen on tile in the men's room at Will Fairchild Memorial Airport one morning. It was dawn, and I was seized by an attack of diarrhea on my way home from work, just as I was passing the airport. It was caused, I'm sure, by my having eaten so many polka dot brownies before going to work the night before. So I swung into the airport and jumped out of my four-door Mercedes. I didn't expect to get into the building, I just wanted to get out of sight. But there was another car in the parking lot at that unlikely hour. So I tried a side door, and it was unlocked. In I flew, and up to the men's room, noting in flight that somebody was running a floor waxing machine. I relieved myself and became as calm and respectable as any other citizen again, or even more so. For a few moments there, I was happier than happy, healthier than healthy, and I saw these words scrawled on the tiles over a wash basin. To be is to do, Socrates. To do is to be, Jean-Paul Sartre. Doobie-doobie-doo, Frank Sinatra. Ahoy again, everyone. One last break here in the audiobook to just remind everyone about the GoFundMe page for Meowmar Padafi, my cat who has kidney disease through no fault of his own. So it wasn't like he went out like drinking and using kidney damaging drugs or anything. That would be my deal, or you'd think. Otherwise, though, that link's down below. He could really use the help. I could really use the help. Being an audiobook narrator doesn't make as much money as you'd think it would, right? No surprise there. But any little bit could help. And if you could share this with, share the GoFundMe with anyone, share this channel with anyone who's into Kurt Vonnegut, and that, or that you know would enjoy just listening to Kurt Vonnegut. I get a lot of people who say, like, I don't even know where to start. Like Kurt Vonnegut, I've always kind of wanted to get into his books. This is a good place to start, I think, for Kurt Vonnegut books. Just listening to someone kind of read them and just see how easy it is. It's not as dense as a lot of people, I think, mistake it for as a great American author. Otherwise, my other books are still available on Audible. Daffodil, Death Gets a Book, A Death in Toledo, and Catcoin, a fictional history of a cryptocurrency, all still available. The Nobody's Billboard t-shirt available on Redbubble. I'd love it if any of you really wanted to get into any of that. So again, thank you all very much. Thank you all so much for being around. Thank you for all of your help and your support, and thank you for being a part of this channel. Thank you for loving Kurt Vonnegut as much as I do, and getting as much out of it as I do. It's really great. It's heartening to hear and see so many people who enjoy a thing like Kurt Vonnegut, who is of a particular era but is so prescient so as to describe our present times so well. What a genius of a guy. So let's continue on with part 5, the finale of Deadeye Dick. Epilogue. I have now seen with my own eyes what a neutron bomb can do to a small city. I am back at the Hotel Olafson after 3 days in my old hometown. Midland City was exactly as I remembered it, except that there were no people living there. The security is excellent. The perimeter of the flash area is marked by a high fence topped with barbed wire, with a watchtower every 300 yards or so. There is a minefield in front of that, and then a low barbed wire entanglement beyond that, which wouldn't stop a truly determined person, but which is meant as a friendly warning about the mines. It is possible for a civilian to visit inside the fence only in daylight. After nightfall, the flash area becomes a free fire zone. Soldiers are under orders to shoot anything that moves, and their weapons are equipped with infrared sights. They can see in the dark. And in the daytime, the only permissible form of transportation for a civilian inside is a bright purple school bus driven by a soldier and with other soldiers aboard as stern and watchful guides. Nobody gets to bring his own car inside or to walk where he likes, even if he has lost his business and all his relatives and everything. It is all government property now. It belongs to all the people instead of just some of them. We were a party of 4, Felix and myself and Bernard Ketchum, our lawyer, and Hippolyta Paul DeMille, the head waiter from the Olafson. Ketchum's wife and Felix's wife had declined to come along. They were afraid of radioactivity, and Felix's wife was especially afraid of it, since she was with child. We were unable to persuade those superstitious souls that the whole beauty of a neutron bomb explosion was that there was no lingering radiation afterwards. Felix and I had run into the same sort of ignorance when it came time to bury Mother next to Father in Cavalry Cemetery. People refused to believe that she herself wasn't radioactive. They were sure that she would make all the other bodies glow in the dark, and that she would seep into the water supply, and so on. For Mother to be personally radioactive, she would have had to bite a piece out of the mantelpiece and then fail to excrete it. If she had done that, it's true, she would have been a holy terror for 20,000 years or more. But she didn't. We brought old Hippolyta Paul DeMille along, who had never been outside Haiti before, on the pretext that he was the brother of a Haitian cook for Dr. Alan Maritimo, the veterinarian, and his wife. Alan was a maverick in the Maritimo family, who had declined to go into the building business. His entire household was killed by the flash. Ketchum had put together fake affidavits which entitled Hippolyte Paul to pass through the gate in a purple school bus with the rest of us. We went to this trouble for Hippolyte Paul because he was our most valuable employee. Without him and his goodwill, the Grand Hotel Olafson would have been a worthless husk. It was worth our while to keep him happy. But Hippolyte Paul, in his excitement about the trip, had volunteered to make us a highly specific gift, which we intended to refuse politely at the proper time. He said that if there was any ghost we thought should haunt Midland City for the next few hundred years, he would raise it from its grave and turn it loose to wander where it would. We tried very hard not to believe that he could do that. But he could. He could. Amazing. There was no odor. We expected a lot of odor, but there was none. Army engineers had buried all the dead under the Block Square Municipal parking lot across the street from police headquarters, where the old courthouse had stood. They had then repaved the lot and put the dwarf arboretum of parking meters back in place. The whole process had been filmed, we were told, from parking lot to mass grave, and then back to parking lot again. My brother Felix, in that rumbling voice of his, speculated that a flying saucer might someday land on the mass grave, and conclude that the whole planet was asphalt, and that parking meters were the only living things. We were sitting in a school bus. We weren't allowed to get out at that point.
Maybe it will look like the Garden of Eden to some bug-eyed monsters,
Felix went on.
They will love it. They will crack open the parking meters with the butts of their zap pistols, and they will feast on all the slugs and beer can tops and coins.
We caught sight of several movie crews, and they were given as the reason we weren't to touch anything, even though it might unquestionably have been our own property. It was as though we were in a national park, full of endangered species. We weren't even to pick a little flower to sniff. It might be the last such flower anywhere. When our school bus took us to Mother's and my little shitbox out in Avondale, for example, I wandered to the Meeker's house next door. Young Jimmy Meeker's tricycle, with white sidewall tires, was sitting in the driveway, waiting patiently for its master. I put my hand on the seat, meaning to roll it back and forth just a few inches, and to wonder what life in Midland City had been all about. And such a yell I heard! Captain Julian Pefko, who was in charge of our party, yelled at me.
"Hands in your pockets!"
That was one of the rules. Whenever men were outside the school bus, they were to keep their hands in their pockets. Women, if they had pockets, were to do the same. If they didn't have pockets, they were to keep their arms folded across their bosoms. Pefko reminded me that we were under martial law as long as we were inside the fence.
"One more dumb trick like that, mister,"
he told me,
"and you're on your way to the stockade. How would you like 20 years on the rock pile?"
he said. I wouldn't, sir, I said. I wouldn't like that at all. And there wasn't any more trouble after that. We certainly all behaved ourselves. You can learn all kinds of habits quickly under martial law. The reason everything had to be left exactly where it was, of course, was so that camera crews could document without the least bit of fakery the fundamental harmlessness of a neutron bomb. Skeptics would be put to flight once and for all. The empty city did not give me the creeps, and Hippolyte Paul actually enjoyed it. He didn't miss the people, since he had no people to miss. Limited to the present tense, he kept exclaiming in Creole, "How rich they are! How rich they are!" But Felix finally found my serenity something to complain about.
"Jesus Christ!"
he exploded as our second afternoon in the Flash area was ending.
"Would you show just a trace of emotion, please?"
So I told him, this isn't anything I haven't seen on practically every day of my adult life. The sun is setting instead of rising, but otherwise, this is what Midland City always looked like and felt like to me when I locked up Schramm's drugstore at dawn. Everybody has left town but me. We were allowed into Midland City in order to photograph and make lists of all the items of personal property which were certainly ours, or which might be ours, or which we thought we might inherit, once all the legal technicalities were unscrambled. As I say, we weren't allowed to actually touch anything. The penalty for trying to smuggle anything out of the Flash area, no matter how worthless, was 20 years in prison for civilians. For soldiers, the penalty was death. As I say, the security was quite wonderful, and we heard many visitors who had certainly been more horribly bereaved than we were praise the military for its smart appearance and efficiency. It was almost as though Midland City were at last being run the way it should have been run all along. But as we were to discover on the morning of our third and final day, where the minefield outside the fence ended, highly treasonous opinion of the federal government began. The farmers on the fringe of the Flash area, in the past as politically inert as mastodons, had been turned into bughouse social commentators by the Flash. They had lost their shopping centers, of course. So Felix and I, and Ketchum and Hippolyte Paul, were having breakfast at the Quality Motor Court out by Sacred Miracle Cave, where we were staying, and where our purple school bus would pick us up. And two farmers in bib overalls, just like old John Fortune in Kathmandu, were passing out leaflets in the coffee shop. The Quality Motor Court was not then under martial law. I understand that all motels within 50 miles of Midland City have now been placed under martial law. These two said the same thing over and over again as they offered their leaflets.
"Read the truth and then write your congressman."
About half the customers refused to even look at the leaflets, but we each took one. The organization which wanted us to write our congressman, it turned out, was Farmers of Southwestern Ohio for Nuclear Sanity. They said that it was all well and good that the federal government should be making idealistic plans for Midland City as a haven for refugees from less fortunate countries or whatever. But they also felt that there should be some public discussion, that the veil of silence should be lifted from the mystery of how all the previous inhabitants had wound up under the municipal parking lot. They confessed that they were fighting a losing battle in trying to make anybody outside of southwestern Ohio care about what happened to some place called Midland City. As far as the farmers knew, Midland City had never even been mentioned on a major network television show until after The Flash. They were wrong about that, incidentally. It was certainly network news during the blizzard of 1960, but I can't remember any other time. Power went off during the blizzard, so the farmers had no way of knowing that Midland City had finally made the TV. They missed it. But that didn't weaken the argument of their leaflet, to wit, that the United States of America was now ruled, evidently, by a small clique of power brokers who believed that most Americans were so boring and ungifted and small-time that they could be slain by the tens of thousands without inspiring any long-term regrets on the part of anyone. They have now proved this with Midland City, said the leaflet, and who is to say that Terre Haute or Schenectady will not be next? That was certainly the most inflammatory of their beliefs, that Midland City had been neutron-bombed on purpose, and not from a truck, but from a missile site or a high-flying airplane. They had hired a mathematician from, they said, a great university to make calculations independent of the government's as to where the flash had originated. The mathematician could not be named, they said, for fear that retaliatory action would be taken against him. But it was his opinion, based largely on the pattern of livestock deaths on the outer perimeter of the flash, that the center of the flash was near exit 11 on the interstate all right, but at least 60 feet above the pavement. That certainly suggested a package which had arrived by air. Either that, or a truck had been hauling a neutron bomb in an enormous pop-up toaster. Bernard Ketchum asked the farmer who had given us our leaflets to name the clique which had supposedly neutron-bombed Midland City. This was the answer he got.
They don't want us to know their name, so they don't have a name. You can't fight back against something that don't have a name.
The military-industrial complex? Said Ketchum archly. The Rockefellers? The international conglomerates? The CIA? The mafia?
And the farmer said to him,
You like any of them names? Just help yourself. Maybe that's who it is. Maybe it ain't. How's a farmer supposed to find out? It's whoever it was shot President Kennedy and his brother, and Martin Luther King.
So there we had it, the ever-growing ball of American paranoia, the ball of string 100 miles in diameter, with the unsolved assassination of John F. Kennedy at its core.
You mentioned the Rockefellers, said the farmer. If you ask me, they don't know any more than I do about who's really running things, what's really going on.
Ketchum asked him why these nameless invisible forces would want to depopulate Midland City, and then maybe Terre Haute and Schenectady after that.
Slavery,
was the farmer's prompt reply.
I beg your pardon?
Said Ketchum.
They aim to bring slavery back,
said the farmer. He wouldn't tell us his name for fear of reprisals, but I had a hunch he was an Osterman. There were several Ostermans with farms out around Sacred Miracle Cave.
They never gave up on it,
he said.
The Civil War wasn't going to make any difference in the long run, as far as they were concerned. Sooner or later, they knew in their hearts we'd get back to owning slaves.
Ketchum said jocularly that he could understand the desirability of a slave economy, especially in view of all the trouble so many American industries were having with foreign competition.
But I fail to see the connection between slaves and empty cities,
he said. "What we figure," said the farmer, "these slaves aren't going to be Americans. They're going to come by the boatload from Haiti and Jamaica and places like that, where there's such terrible poverty and overpopulation. They're going to need housing. What's cheaper, to use what we've already got or to build new?" He let us think that over for a moment, and then he added, "And guess what? You've seen that fence with the watchtowers? Do you honestly believe that fence is ever coming down?" Ketchum said he certainly wished he knew who these sinister forces were. "I'll make a wild guess," said the farmer, "and you're going to laugh at it because the people I'll name want to be laughed at until it's too late. They don't want anybody worrying about whether they're taking over the country from top to bottom until it's too late." This was his wild guess. The Ku Klux Klan. My own guess is that the American government had to find out for certain whether the neutron bomb was as harmless as it was supposed to be. So it set one off in a small city which nobody cared about, where people weren't doing all that much with their lives anyhow, where businesses were going under or moving away. The government couldn't test a bomb on a foreign city, after all, without running the risk of starting World War III. There is even a chance that Fred T. Barry, with all his contacts high in the military, could have named Midland City as the ideal place to test a neutron bomb. At the end of our third day in Midland City, Felix became tearful and risked the displeasure of Captain Julian Pefko by asking him if we could please, on the way to the main gate, have our purple school bus make a slight detour past Cavalry Cemetery so we could visit our parents' grave. For all his rough and ready manners, Pefko, like so many professional soldiers, turned out to have an almond macaroon for a heart. He agreed. Almond macaroons. Preheat an oven to 300 degrees and work 1 cup of confectioner's sugar into a cup of almond paste with your fingertips. Add 3 egg whites, a dash of salt, and a half teaspoon of vanilla. Fit unglazed paper onto a cookie sheet. Sprinkle with granulated sugar. Force the almond paste mixture through a round pastry tube so that uniform gobs, nicely spaced, drop onto the glazed paper. Sprinkle with granulated sugar. Bake about 20 minutes. Tip: put the sheet of macaroons on a damp cloth, paper side down. This will make it easier to loosen the cookies from the paper. Cool. Cavalry Cemetery has never been any comfort to me, so I almost stayed in the purple school bus. But then, after all the others had got out, I got out too, to stretch my legs. I strolled into the old part of the cemetery, which had been all filled up, by and large, before I was born. I stationed myself at the foot of the most imposing monument in the Bone Orchard, a 62-foot gray marble obelisk with a stone football on top. It celebrated George Hickman Bannister, a 17-year-old whose peephole was closed while he was playing high school football on the morning of Thanksgiving in 1924. He was from a poor family, but thousands of people had seen him die, our parents not among them, and many of them had chipped in to buy him the obelisk. Our parents had no interest in sports. Maybe 20 feet away from the obelisk was the most fanciful marker in the cemetery. A radial air-cooled airplane engine reproduced in pink marble and fitted with a bronze propeller. This was the headstone of Will Fairchild, the World War I ace in the Lafayette Escadrille, after whom the airport was named. He hadn't died in the war. He had crashed and burned, again with thousands watching, in 1922 while stunt flying at the Midland County Fair. He was the last of the Fairchilds, a pioneering family after which so much in the city was named. He had failed to reproduce before his peephole closed. Inscribed in the bronze propeller were his name and dates and the euphemism flyers in the Lafayette Escadrille used for death in an airplane in wartime: Gone West. West to an American in Europe, of course, meant home. Here he was home. Somewhere near me, I knew, was the headless body of old August Gunther, who had taken father when a youth to the fanciest whorehouses in the Corn Belt. Shame on him. I raised my eyes to the horizon, and there, on the other side of shining Sugar Creek, was the white-capped slate roof of my childhood home. In the level rays of the setting sun, it did indeed resemble a postcard picture of Fujiyama, the sacred volcano of Japan. Felix and Ketchum were at a distance, visiting more contemporary graves. Felix would tell me later that he had managed to maintain his aplomb while visiting mother and father, but that he had gone all to pieces when turning away from their markers. He discovered that he had been standing on Celia Hoover's grave. Eloise Metzger, the woman I had shot, was also over there somewhere. I had never paid her a call. I heard my brother go to pieces over Celia Hoover's grave, and I looked in his direction. I saw that Hippolyta Paul DeMille was attempting to cheer him up. I was not alone, by the way. A soldier with a loaded M16 was with me, making certain that I kept my hands in my pockets. We weren't even to touch tombstones. And Felix and Hippolyte Paul and Bernard Ketchum also kept their hands in their pockets, no matter how much they might have wanted to gesticulate among the tombstones. And then Hippolyte Paul DeMille said something to Felix in Creole which was so astonishing, so offensive, that Felix's grief dropped away like an iron mask. Hippolyte Paul had offered to raise the ghost of Celia Hoover from the grave, if Felix would really like to see her again. There was a clash between two cultures, or I have never seen one. To Hippolyte Paul, raising a spirit from a grave was the most ordinary sort of favor for a gifted metaphysician to offer a friend. He wasn't proposing to exhume a zombie, a walking corpse with dirt and rags clinging to it, and so on. A clearly malicious thing to do. He simply wanted to give Felix a misty but recognizable ghost to look at, and to talk to, although the ghost would not be able to reply to him, if that might somehow comfort him. To Felix, it seemed that our Haitian headwaiter was offering to make him insane, for only a lunatic would gladly meet a ghost. So these two very different sorts of human beings, their hands thrust deep into their pockets, talked past each other in a mixture of English and Creole, while Ketchum and Captain Pefko and a couple of other soldiers looked on. Hippolyte Paul was at last so deeply hurt that he turned his back on Felix and walked away. He was coming in my direction, and I signaled with my head that he should keep coming, that I would explain the misunderstanding, that I understood his point of view as well as my brother's, and so on. If he stayed mad at Felix, there went the Grand Hotel Olafson. "She doesn't feel anything. She doesn't know anything," he said to me in Creole. He meant that Celia's ghost wouldn't have caused any embarrassment or inconvenience or discomfort of any sort to Celia herself, who could feel nothing. The ghost would be nothing more than an illusion, based harmlessly on whatever Celia used to be. "I know, I understand," I said. I explained that Felix had been upset about a lot of things lately, and that Hippolyte Paul would be mistaken to take anything Felix said too much to heart. Hippolyte Paul nodded uncertainly, but then he brightened. He said that there was surely somebody in the cemetery that I would like to see again. The soldier guarding us understood none of this, of course. "You are nice," I said in Creole. "You are too generous, but I am happy as I am." The old headwaiter was determined to work his miracle, whether we wanted it or not. He argued that we owed it both to the past and to the future to raise some sort of representative ghost, which would haunt the city no matter who lived there for generations to come. So, for the sake of the hotel, I told him to go ahead and raise one, but from the part of the cemetery where we stood, where I didn't know anyone. So he raised the ghost of Will Fairchild. The old barnstormer was wearing goggles and a white silk scarf and a black leather helmet and all, but no parachute. I remembered what Father had told me about him one time.
Will Fairchild would be alive today if he had only worn a parachute.
So there was Hippolyte Paul DeMille's gift to whoever was going to inhabit Midland City next. The restless ghost of Will Fairchild. And I, Rudy Waltz, the William Shakespeare of Midland City, the only serious dramatist to ever live and work there, will now make my own gift to the future, which is a legend. I have invented an explanation of why Will Fairchild's ghost is likely to be seen roaming almost anywhere in town. In the empty arts center, in the lobby of the bank, out among the little shitboxes of Avondale, out among the luxurious homes of Fairchild Heights, in the vacant lot where the public library stood for so many years. Will Fairchild is looking for his parachute. You want to know something? We are still in the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages, they haven't ended yet.